Hi guys, it's UK back again. There was a video the other day, and I'm sorry I can't remember who posted it. My history blog on YouTube has kind of dropped this one off the end. But someone posted about pet peeves in role playing, and last night I was having a bit of an insomnia session. And I was laying there and I started thinking about it. Now this is in regards to Pathfinder rather than RPGs in general. But these are the pet peeves that I have. Or maybe not just Pathfinder, but D20 role-playing as well. But primarily Pathfinder. Okay, one is power gaming. It doesn't matter whether you call it power gaming, min-maxing, optimising, twinking, whatever. It's, I think, the bane of the game. It's one of those things that's fine if it's something that the entire group does and the GM is happy with. Then, play to your heart's content, do whatever you need to do. But my group and I are not that way inclined. We like a casual game. There's no twinking it out, there's no doing anything silly or anything like that. But in the past, we have had a power game, and quite a bad one. Outside of the game, the chap was brilliant. He was a good mate. Couldn't ask for a nicer friend, But once he got into that game, the rules were set in stone. There was no, these are just guidelines. It was set in stone, and if he could do something within the rules, then he would do it. And it never particularly sat well with any of the guys at the table. This is going back, I think, early to mid 3.0 D&D. And Wizards of the Coast at the time had released I suppose it was an early adventure path. They did. I can't remember. There was about 7 or 8 books, I think. Including titles. Just so those of you out there who know this stuff can work out what we're doing. Was Forge of Fury, Speaker in Dream, Lord of the Iron Fortress, and ultimately culminated in Bastion of Broken Souls, I think it was called. And I pretty much ran that with a few other scenarios, and linked them all together to the big, to add more emphasis to the big bad at the end of it. And when they did finally reach the big bad, and this was the sort of encounter that should have gone on for several rounds and really made everyone, fear for the lives of their characters and whether they were going to be successful, sort of thing. And this particular guy, if I remember it correctly, it's going back many years now, but he was playing a straight cleric, and it was all high level at this point. And basically, while everyone else sort of charged in was having sort of troubles hitting it, or maybe knocking a couple of hit points off here and there, he basically buffed himself. I forget exactly again what he did, but it was things like heroism and the spell's gone out of my head now, divine something or other, which basically made him a fighter sort of thing, and a few other buffs. And then he basically just walked up to this thing, and then on his next action, 2 hits, snick, and the big bad was killed outright. And to be fair, I would have probably, in that situation, gone, right, well, I'll just up his hit points a bit and let the fight go on for a couple more rounds for the party to take him down. But I was in such shock that he'd been able to pull this off. Because, as I say, we don't play that sort of twinkiness. You wouldn't get all those sort of spells dropped on characters. I let the dice fall where they may. And pretty much everybody at the table was pretty pissed at this guy. Because, it was felt that this, he what he'd done, the way he played, had pretty much ruined the campaign, especially at the end. And it's something that we often try to sit him down and talk to him about, and to the point of saying, look, you're a power gamer, fair play, you like to really optimise your characters, but the rest of us don't play like that. And it's always my opinion, if you have a group that doesn't play like that, then the power gamer sort of mod needs to rein their gaming tendencies in and play to the common denominator. Likewise, I wouldn't expect a casual player to join a group of optimising players and play what they would consider a substandard character. And that was pretty much his point. That, we want him to play a shit character, as he put it. as things went on, he did kind of mellow a little bit, but not an awful lot. Before eventually, a situation outside the game basically forced him to leave. But it's really left a bad taste in the mouths about power gaming, because I think every group is different. But for us, and myself especially, the whole optimization and everything just takes the fun out of it. Really does. Really takes the fun out of it. Secondly, knowledge skills. This is specific to sort of like D20 and Pathfinder. My experience is that you've got all these knowledge skills so that players can, the characters through their players can learn things in game. They find something. What is this, or what happened on such and such a date? What was the details of a battle? Coat of arms. Who are these people at court? These are what you have knowledge skill checks and things for. And yet, what I find is my players want them as they'll run into a monster they've never encountered before, and suddenly the first thing I get after giving the description, sometimes before I've even finished the description, I will get what knowledge skill do I need. And they're not after, sort of like general. They want to know what its resistances are, what its immunities are, what its weaknesses are, what its strengths are. And it's like, isn't this just sort of like spoiling the encounter for you? And because I know when I play, if I run into something I don't know, I've never encountered before, I don't want to be told what its strengths and weaknesses are. I want to find out myself. I want to find out that fire doesn't work on it when I throw a firebolt or something at it. And the fact that that's what knowledge checks seem to have been relegated to gets on my wick a little bit. Thirdly, divination spells, and probably not in the way that you're thinking. I enjoy looking online on various message boards and reading people's game write-ups. And one of the things I notice across the majority of them is that when characters are going to set off or something on a quest, or when they reach a certain point in their game, up come the divination spells: contact other plane, divination, augury, whatever, so that they can get a bit of extra help on determining their next course of action. I can count the number of times that my players have done this in the last 12 years since 3rd edition came out on one hand, and 2 of those are in the same scenario. They just don't do it, and I'm kind of at a loss because I don't understand why they don't do it. It's another one of those, I think, roleplay or D&D tropes, although maybe not a big one, and it kind of bugs me a little bit that they don't do it. Even if it's the sort of thing where you go, well, I don't want to waste a spell slot on that sort of spell. That's what wands and scrolls are for, surely. Or if needs be, before a quest starts, buying a priest's time to cast those sort of spells. Only a minor niggle sort of thing, but it is one of those pet peeves. The 4th one is weird races. I've done a couple of videos in the past about my dislike of the fantastical in my fantasy, which sounds really odd considering it's D&D and it's meant to be this fantasy world. But I like my fantasy to be, and I know some of you guys out there will roll your eyes at this point and probably gnash your teeth or something like that, but I like my game worlds to be a mix of sort of like medieval Dark Age Europe and how the Lord of the Rings setting, Middle Earth, is presented, especially in the films. Yes, I know it's Lord of the Rings and it doesn't really fit into D&D or any of that stuff, fully aware of that. But that sort of mix of those two appearances, I think, is perhaps the way to do it, is a perfect example of how I like my fantasy. There's no flying ships, there's no floating castles unless there's a bloody good reason for it. The races are humanish, or humanish, depending. You know, there's no, you know, when you look at, let's say, Lord of the Rings, you have humans and elves and halflings and dwarves. You don't have lizard men and bugbear. I mean, all right, I know these things don't exist in that world exactly, but, you know, I'm looking from a D&D perspective. You don't have lizard men and bugbears and half vampires and you know, plant people ever sitting around in a tavern or in the same city, sort of thing. And there's a reason for that. It's because they're monsters, and yet it always seems that players want to play monsters. A while back I ran a campaign, I mean this is going back about 4 or 5 years, I ran a campaign, another one of the Wizards of the Coast ones, I want to say Screaming Hordes, no, again, the name of the scenario I made, and one of the characters was killed off, unfortunately, and the player said, can I play, yeah, they were in a swamp sort of area and there were lizard folk, and he said, can I play a lizard man? And we kind of had a brief natter while everyone had a cigarette break, sort of thing. And I said, yeah, okay, fine. You know, we came up with the excuse that he was an exile from this particular tribe, blah 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 blah. And so he played a lizard man druid, and it was a really good character. I can't fault it. But that was a bit of a one-off because, well, actually, I'll give you another example. One of my players at the moment has done a backup character if anything happens to his one. And what he's chosen to play in this particular character is a Tengu, which, for those that don't know, is kind of like a birdman, like a raven or a crow sort of thing in humanoid form. And I have pointed out to him on a couple of occasions, and I don't think it's settled in, that in my game world, that is a monster. It's not going to be allowed into a city. And if you turn around and went, the town or village where you start, and maybe a couple of surrounding ones, somehow your character has managed to fit in, whatever he's done, and the people have accepted him, fine. But once you get away from that and you move somewhere else, he's a monster. You know, you can't walk up into the next nearest city and expect to be let in. He's a monster. You know, this isn't the sort of race that people see on a day-to-day basis. And it's going to be like, why are you travelling with this? And it's not going to, you know, without a very good reason, it's not going to be allowed into cities or anything like this. And it's like, why, you know, why do players, what's wrong with the core races? They fit the worlds that you're playing. In fact, one of the things that turns me off a lot of published settings is that people put out there, or even homebrew ones when I do find them, is that the GM has added to the list of playable races things that, in my mind, shouldn't be playable races. For example, in a recent, little bit of discussion on one of my feeds recently, someone suggested the Midgard setting to me as being quite good. So I took a look at this, and what I saw of the campaign world, I was quite interested. And then I got to this point where they've made, I think it was Minotaurs, Kobolds, and their own sort of Warforged sort of version as player races. And instantly, any interest I had in the setting went out the window, because it seems that they've made those an integral part of the setting. Well, that's fine, but to me, they're monsters. You know, I like the traditional D&D sort of thing. So, if it works in your games, it works in your games. But for me, I like traditional monsters. I allow ASMR and Tiefling, and I'm looking at a couple other possible options for my next game, for the campaign setting that I'm trying to write. But it does kind of bug me that players feel this need to want to play monstrous races. Lastly, and this is definitely directed at D&D and Pathfinder, and it's non-base classes. Let's take Pathfinder for instance, as it's my game of choice. You've got your barbarian, your fighter, your cleric, druid, monk, paladin, ranger, rogue, sorcerer, so on. Every concept you could possibly want exists in those 12 or 13 classes. So why do publishers feel the need to create new ones? For example, with Pathfinder, you have things like the gunslinger, which is, to be fair, in the right sort of setting, this one would work. But it's basically a fighter type that specialises in using gunpowder weapons, flintlocks and rifles and so forth. But then you get things like ninja and samurai and cavalier. And it's like, really? Do you need classes to represent those? Surely cavalier is just a fighter with the taking feats and abilities for mounted combat. Surely a ninja you can easily just play as a rogue or even as a fighter rogue, and the samurai is just another fighter. Do you need specific abilities to play these classes? The alchemist is another one that sort of bugs me. I'm going to go on a couple of these. So, the alchemist is a class that makes kind of mutagens. He's kind of a Jekyll and Hyde sort of character. He drinks his stuff, and then whatever attribute it increases, he becomes a Hulk, or he becomes lithe and animal-like, so he can run. And he can, they create sort of like fire bombs or acid bombs that they can throw. And really, I look at that and go, does that really need a class? Can you not just play that as a spellcaster that creates potions and alchemical gear? Likewise, only one more, which really does bug me, is the summoner in Pathfinder, which is a class pretty much devoted just to summoning creatures and having them fight for you. You get a thing called Needle on, which is like it's almost like an animal companion, I suppose. It's like a summoned beastie that can get better as you get better, and things like that. And I just feel that there's no need for a class like that, because your other ones, druid, sorcerer, cleric, wizard, whatever, have access to summoning spells, summon monster, or summon nature's ally. You don't need a class specifically devoted to summoning monsters. It feels to me like you're taking that away from those classes. Magus is another one. I did say only one more, but Magus is one that really does bug me. The Magus is a class that is it's a class that is a fighter wizard. And alright, it's not fantastic in both, but that was kind of the point. If you wanted to play a fighter wizard, you had to dual class. And it's kind of like, well, you've now basically made the Eldritch Knight prestige class in the Pathfinder rulebook pointless, because now there's no need to do that. You can just play the Magus. And it just feels that a lot of these extra classes that people add are for no real good reason. It just feels that they throw these out for players that want something different. And it's like, it shouldn't be... I think this is the pet peeve for me. It shouldn't be the classes and the races, going back to my fourth peeve, that make the game interesting. It should be the story that's making the game interesting. You could play the same barbarian in two different campaigns, but the story would be different. So that's where it comes from. Anyway, I've rambled on far too long with this. I didn't intend to go on quite so much, especially on that last one, so forgive me on that. But that's my pet peeves with regards to gaming at the moment. I'm sure things will change and shift as we go along, but that's where I am right now. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope that wasn't too too off-putting. Anyway, thank you, and take care. Good gaming.